I'm just combining two papers here for making one podcast. They're not directly related, but kind of interesting in the way we have evolved to look at other species and try to understand them and see if we are somehow different. One of them is where we have gone and found archaeological evidences and tried to interpret the artifacts found to say whether there are intentionally produced tools which indicated the use of hands, opposable thumbs, technologies that were developed and shared, social learning involved, and intelligence on some level. But this study here challenges that notion. Wild macaques challenge the origin of intentional tool production. What do? They basically look at unintentional flakes produced from cracking nuts with a rock and so on to see whether they look like some of the pieces that have been found at human hominin settlements which have been used to interpret tool building, for example. Intentionally produced sharp-edged stone flakes and flaked pieces are our primary evidence for the emergence of technology in our lineage. This evidence is used to decipher the earliest hominin behavior, cognition, and subsistence strategies. Here we report on the largest lithic assemblage associated with a primate foraging behavior undertaken by long-tailed macaques. This behavior results in a landscape-wide record of flaked stone material, almost indistinguishable from early hominin flaked flaked pieces and flakes. It is now clear that the production of unintentional conchoidal sharp-edged flakes can result from tool-assisted foraging in non-hominin primates. Comparison with Pliocene lithic assemblages dating from 3.3 to 1.56 million years ago show that flakes produced by macaques fall within the technological range of artifacts made by early hominins. Right? So this raises serious questions of whether at the settlements there were intentional tool building or unintentional flaking that happened while tool-assisted foraging was going on, like finding fruits and nuts and then cracking them open with rocks, for example. In the absence of behavioral observations, the assemblages produced by monkeys would likely be identified as anthropogenic in origin and interpreted as evidence of intentional tool production. So basically there are some examples given of the limestone flakes and flaked pieces produced unintentionally during long-tailed macaque nut cracking and how they compare to some of the evidences found in the past. So I won't go into the detail, but N here is comparative Oldowan flakes from BD1, which is a site from East Africa where these were looked at. White dots represent the impact points associated with flake detachments. Okay, on all these figures here. Here, for example, the white dots. Black arrows represent a directionality of a flake scar, and white arrows indicate the location of an impact point on a flake platform. So various details on how unintentionally formed flake pieces and flakes could easily be misinterpreted as intentional human tool building and extrapolated to saying cognition, skill, sharing of technology, etc., which we have discussed before in other chapters. The second paper that I'm discussing here goes into a bit more detail on the idea of social learning. In general, humans are always wondering about whether we are the sentient ones, conscious ones, whether other species have intelligence. There are many experiments done to interpret intelligence, feeding or having the primates and non-primates open tricky boxes to reach food, or open puzzles, sign languages among chimpanzees and gorillas, and so on and so forth. And this is always tricky, how we define intelligence. One of the things is to see if everything is just inherited from parents vertically, genetically, or there is learning that is happening horizontally by watching peers, or obliquely by learning from teachers. So the idea also is that if some species are learning something that is very non-utilitarian, like dolphins learning to dance or walk on water just for fun and teaching it to other dolphins. These are considered advanced evidences of intelligence. So this experiment basically used bumblebees to see if they can do social learning. So let's do some abstract reading and some conclusion reading just to get a good sense of what they did. The astonishing behavioral repertoires of social insects have been thought largely innate, so inherited, but these insects have repeatedly demonstrated remarkable capacities for both individual and social learning. So they may go off on themselves and try to figure out a puzzle, whatever it is. For example, bees are supposed to solve the traveling salesman problem to avoid visiting the same flower again once they have picked nectar from it. Social learning is where you look at others and learn from what they are doing. Using the bumblebee Bombus terrestris as a model, we developed a two-option puzzle box task and used open diffusion paradigms to observe the transmission of novel, unnatural foraging behaviors through populations. Box opening behavior is spread through colonies seeded with a demonstrator trained to perform one of the two possible behavioral variants, and the observers acquired the demonstrated variant. This shows social learning. This preference persisted among observers even when the alternative technique was discovered. In controlled diffusion experiments that lacked a demonstrator, some bees spontaneously opened the puzzle boxes but were significantly less proficient than those that learned in the presence of a demonstrator. So when there is a teacher, they learn and they get better at it. When they accidentally discover a new trick, they are not as good at it. So maybe over time it gets more efficient or proficient. This suggested that social learning was crucial to proper acquisition of box opening. Additional open diffusion experiments where two behavioral variants were initially present in similar proportions ended with a single variant becoming dominant. So two variants were added in terms of social learning, but one of them became dominant due to stochastic processes. So it's just how the social learning spread through the colony. We discuss whether these results, which replicate those found in primates and birds, might indicate a capacity for culture in bumblebees. Okay, what is culture? In humans, it is social learning based on religion, allegories. Altruism, for example, is often a cultural trait which can be learned and also lost when it's not transmitted through cultural practices or religious mores and so on and so forth, right? So the conclusion here is, even if culture is rare or non-existent in extant wild social insects, the mere existence of this capacity in an invertebrate, given the right conditions and opportunity as provided here, makes it plausible that cultural processes may have contributed to the emergence of behavioral foraging specializations, nesting architecture, and colony organization. So when you have these huge number of insects living in a eusocial colony, you have to understand how the processes of foraging, nesting architecture, colony organizations, worker bees, queen bees, and protectors, soldier bees, and so on become so well organized. Perhaps elements of the vast complex repertoire of innate behaviors seen in social insects were not always so instinctive. So a lot of social learning and then transmission, maybe as genetic transmission may be involved, cultural learning may be involved. The reason that we have often failed to see evidence of culture in some non-human animals may be that we are simply looking too late, that they have already done the self-selection of cultural practices via social learning, and now it looks like it's genetically inherited, whereas it has evolved through cultural learning. Social insects may represent an exciting model to investigate these hypotheses in the future. So obviously ignorance can often be a limitation, so it's a good example of doing experiments to see whether social learning can lead to new expertise of opening boxes, and then how that expertise is transmitted through the colony through diffusion, social learning, and then whether stochastic processes can select one of the two tricks that have been introduced, and it seems very possible. So it's kind of a new exciting result. I'm sure there'll be more experiments following up these reported experiments to see what are the details and how maybe some of the past behavioral interpretations of eusocial insects and birds and animals can be looked at more carefully with maybe some more experiments of this sort. Okay, I thought these are cute, so I just wanted to leave them here in the new findings under climate and human evolution. So even though we are talking about human evolution predominantly, we have to understand evolution as a whole and how it evolves in other species and what it may mean about our own evolution, whether we are really so special or we are also just part of the evolution that has happened in other species as well. Okay.